Not only is Chicken Little the worst Disney animated movie, it's among the worst animated movies of all time. Make Mine Music is just 10 dreadful shorts stitched together to make an awful full-length film. Even Mickey and the gang couldn't save Fun and Fancy free from being a horrific movie. The Sword in the Stone is unfortunately just another dull and uninteresting Disney feature. Melody Time is another one of those wartime era movies that was extremely tough to watch in one sitting. The only thing that I remember about the adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad is constantly switching off and getting distracted as a kid. I'm sure that Eileen Woods did as good as a job as she could with a weak script, but I actively hated her performance as Cinderella. Saludos Amigos was the only Disney animated movie that I hadn't watched until just recently for the purposes of this video. All I'll say is that I wouldn't recommend the film to literally anyone. Other than the iconic Everybody Wants to Be a Cat song, everything else in Aristocats unfortunately fell flat. I can't believe that Disney greenlit Dinosaur. The characters look ugly and the plot moves way too slow. The main problem with the Winnie the Pooh movies is that they all feel the same and you can't tell one from another. 101 Dalmatians is another generic bland Disney movie, but if it weren't for the film then we wouldn't have never gotten this year's outstanding Cruella movie. The problem with so many of Disney's original movies is that they are incredibly outdated and a struggle to get through. Bambi is no exception to this. I will never understand why Disney decided to make their first theatrical sequel a follow-up to Rescuers other than because the original was a huge box office success. It baffles me to why Disney haven't rethemed the Three Caballeros ride in the Mexican pavilion at Epcot to Coco. Winnie the Pooh's awful box office reception was one of the main reasons that Disney stopped producing 2D animated movies. To be honest, I remember pretty much nothing that happened in The Rescuers, but I remember mildly enjoying it as a kid, even though it's one of very few Disney movies that I've only watched once. The extremely short runtime, clocking in at just over 1 hour, works in the film's favour. However, nothing in Dumbo is very memorable. You'd expect a sequel to a 50-year-old movie to be a significant improvement over the original, now that so much more advanced technology was available to them. But somehow Fantasia 2000 managed to be even worse than its average predecessor. The bright, vibrant colours will attract kids, but there isn't much in Alice in Wonderland for older audiences. The trailers for Raya and the Last Dragon looked great. The film certainly wasn't anything special, but I did however thoroughly enjoy She Shoot, Boone and Tuk Tuk. The Great Mouse Detective would have worked so much better as a short film. However, I really enjoyed King Ratigan. Frozen is extremely overrated in my opinion, but I do think that it would make for a good Disney live action remake. I don't hate Home on the Range like many of you do, and I did enjoy Slim's song, but it certainly wasn't a great film overall. Aurora was barely in the movie. The only reason that Sleeping Beauty isn't placed lower on this list is due to Maleficent's stunning fight scene as a dragon against Prince Philip. The songs that Phil Collins did were phenomenal. Everything else in Tarzan was meh. There's been better Robin Hood adaptations, but having grown up just a 5-minute drive away from Sherwood Forest, I do get a kick out of any Robin Hood adaptation. The spaghetti scene is so iconic that Lady and the Tramp had to be placed quite high on this list. Like many of the earlier Disney films, I appreciate their legacy and impact that they had on animation, but unfortunately I don't personally get a lot of enjoyment out of Peter Pan. The Jungle Book will always have a special place in my heart as it was Walt's last film before he passed away. Once again, Phil Collins does an excellent job with the film's soundtrack, but like many Disney movies, Brother Bear has a very weak plot. It's shocking that back then Disney were willing to take extreme risks in making an extremely dark animated film that will scare kids but can be enjoyed by adults. Unfortunately for Disney, the risk didn't pay off and the film became one of Disney's biggest flops of all time. I'm torn on Fantasia, as on one hand I appreciate what the movie was able to accomplish for music and film, but a lot of parts were slow and a struggle to get through, possibly due to the feature having an extremely long runtime. of over 2 hours. Atlantis: The Lost Empire deserves much more love than it receives. Sure, it's nothing groundbreaking, but the film's still very entertaining. The Fox and the Hound is a lot more enjoyable than most Disney movies made in the 80s, but be prepared, the ending will leave you scarred for life. This is probably the movie that I have watched the most as a kid that wasn't made by Pixar. The film leans into its 80s time period, from the song choices all the way down to the style of clothes worn by the humans. Treasure Planet has become a cult classic, and whilst I do think that it was enjoyable, unfortunately the annoying robot kind of ruined the film for me. Snow White is a groundbreaking animated movie that changed filmmaking forever and is a must-watch for anyone who's a fan of animation. Pinocchio is a necessary watch for any Disney animation fan, but you have to understand that the film was made all the way back in 1940, when animation was first starting out, so obviously its animation does look outdated. As a kid, I found Pocahontas boring, but on rewatching it I appreciate how Disney balanced the darker and more complicated themes that kids wouldn't understand, with memorable comic relief side characters to keep kids engaged. The second darkest movie, only behind Black Cauldron, is pretty good, but the final act is on a whole other level. Maybe it helped having extremely low expectations, but Frozen 2 gives Elsa a much more interesting character arc, and the Norse mythology elements were certainly welcoming additions to the Frozen franchise. For the most part, Bolt is a fun classic adventure movie, but the reason that it's not higher on this list is that unfortunately a good chunk of the film about halfway through really dragged. Hercules is another great Renaissance movie that is beloved by pretty much everyone. Hades is easily the best character in the film, and I loved his comedic henchman Pain and Panic. The Little Mermaid put Disney back on the map and saved the studio after their recent movies prior to The Little Mermaid were all box office flops. Although I'm in the minority in slightly preferring the remake, the original is still an exceptional take on the classic Arabian Nights story. Other than Tom Hanks voicing Woody, I've never loved a voice actor's performance as an animated character as I did with Robbie Williams' outstanding performance as a genie. Mulan is an action-packed spectacle. The core message of female equality wasn't in your face, unlike in many other female-led movies, and I thoroughly enjoyed Eddie Murphy's take on Mushu. The first 10 minutes of The Lion King rivals the first 10 minutes of Up for the crown of best opening to an animated movie. After just recently rewatching Beauty and the Beast, I can safely say that the film still holds up and was well deserving of its Best Picture nomination. Emperor's New Groove is the most pure fun and most comedic movie that Disney has ever made. I got a lot of enjoyment out of Kuzco and Yzma, but some of the more serious scenes felt a little shoehorned in just to balance out the comedy. Stitch is adorable, and Disney did a great job at making us feel for Nanny, who has to act as a mother figure for Lilo. The best thing about Princess and the Frog is its beautiful New Orleans setting and catchy songs. Dr. Facilier is still, in my opinion, Disney's greatest villain. Meet the Robinsons will appeal to a more niche audience than many other Disney movies, but the film did a great job at making me care for the characters and their journey. The twist to the bowler hat guy's origin was handled extremely well and does a great job at making you feel sorry for Goob. Tangled is my younger sister's favourite movie of all time, so naturally I've watched it a gazillion times at this point. Even though I've watched Tangled so many times, I've never found myself bored thanks to likeable characters, an outstanding soundtrack and phenomenal villain. Big Hero 6 is a breath of fresh air from your typical darker superhero film. It has so much more heart and charm than you get in a Marvel or DC movie. Tadashi's death really hit hard and was unexpected so early on in the film. Extremely unpopular opinion, but I loved everything about Ralph Breaks the Internet except for the final act, which got too messy and didn't end up sticking the landing. It was obvious that the princesses were only included to be milked to death in merchandise, but I still enjoyed their cameos and adored Merida's other studio joke. Moana is a visually stunning emotional rollercoaster. Every song is so much better than any song from Frozen, and I can't wait for the upcoming Moana TV show. but still believe that Disney should do a theatrical sequel one day. Zootopia was a huge financial success, but for some reason never really seems to get talked about anymore, which is a shame as the movie is extraordinary. The main mystery to why predators are going savage is hawking, and I love Nick and Judy's classic buddy cop humour throughout the film. Wreck-It Ralph has some of the best world building that I've ever seen in a film. Every joke in the film sticks to landing, and the I'm bad and that's good monologue scene that Ralph gives as he sacrificed himself hits hard, and I loved his dynamics with Vanellope. Wreck-It Ralph is in my top 10 movies of all time, the film's that great. Thanks for watching the video. Feel free to leave your favourite Walt Disney Animated movies in the comment section below.